welcome. My name is Noémie Ott. I'm the immediate past chair of the Young EFC. I'm very happy to have Gareth with us today for the career webinar. We will keep the Q&A until the end, but if you have very pressing question or if you really want to ask it, just drop it in the chat, and then we will see when Gareth can answer. I will do a short introduction, Gareth, or do you want to start straight away?
I think I'll cover that in my first couple of slides. So
awesome. Go for it.
Okay. Thank you, Noémie. Hello, everyone. I don't know whether to say good morning or good afternoon. I guess it depends where you are. It's a pleasure to be here today to present this EFC career webinar, and thank you to Noémie for inviting me. I hope you find something in this that's useful. I'm going to start out by saying that I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. But I gather that the aim of these webinars is to share experience. So I'm just going to share my experience so far in my career, give what I think are some tips that I would have appreciated when I was starting out on my career journey. And, you know, please take what you find as useful. If there's one thing, I'll be happy, and throw away anything that you feel isn't useful for your particular situation and your particular personality and character. Okay, just a brief introduction to who I am. So I'm an electrochemist. My day job is here in London in the National Physical Laboratory, where I'm a senior NPL fellow in the electrochemistry group. But I also have a number of outside interests and activities. I was president of the Institute of Corrosion from 2018 to 2020, then of the World Corrosion Organization from 2022 to 2025, and I'm currently president of the EFC. So one thing that this tells you about me is that I'm not very good at saying no to things. So I do end up taking on maybe a bit more than I should at times, but that's something I've learned to deal with over the years. A little bit of a background about where I work. And again, I think I'm probably quite unusual in the modern world in that I've only had one employer. So I have worked for NPL for my entire working career so far since I left university. I think that's becoming increasingly less common with the modern job market and the way the world is. So well, I'm not sure how much you're going to learn from me. You're maybe going to learn why I stayed here so long and why I didn't take other options. But yeah, as I say, there may be some things that are useful for you, some things that aren't so useful. NPL is a government-owned laboratory in southwest London in Teddington. It's 125 years old this year, so it's got quite a rich pedigree. And corrosion research has been going on this site since 1927. So we're 2 years away from 100 years of corrosion research in this location. And I'm very proud to be a part of that rich history. We've grown significantly in the last 5 years or so. We're now up to about 1,500 scientists and engineers working across all areas of science and technology. But we're very much focused on measurement and testing, and particularly standardization. As I say, we sit in this area between academia and industry. So I'm not really at a university, I'm not really at a company, although people in academia tend to see me as working for a company, and people in industry tend to see me as working for something like a university. So we sit in this, what's called the Valley of Death, and we sometimes act as a kind of translator between the two sectors. So as I say, I've stayed in this space all my life. Most people pick one or the other, academia or industry. I've stayed here because I just feel it's the best of both worlds. But for the vast majority of people, I think they have a natural leaning towards one or the other. So I did my first venture into AI. I'm a bit of an AI skeptic. I don't trust it. I see severe limitations, and I think it's a massive hype bubble that is unfortunately going to burst at some point. However, I do recognize its usefulness. It's very good at collating and collecting information. It saves a lot of time and labor for simple, well-defined tasks. So I used it for the first time to put this image together, and it was pretty good. This took about less than 5 minutes to put together, much quicker than I could have drawn it myself, and much better. However, I do note a few things with it. Okay, there's a lot of bias here. So first of all, this student is a white male. Second of all, academia is kind of colored green and the bush is green. Industry has a plume of smoke coming out of it, and for some reason the bush is the same color as the factory, a kind of orange. So I'm not sure where that comes from. But overall, I think I was pretty happy with my first AI image. It's much better than I would have drawn it myself. I've also included some of the questions that were sent to Noémie in advance of this webinar. I'll come back to them at the end, and I'm happy to answer these and any other ones that people have or that occur to you during the presentation. So I'm going to start way back when I was in school. So I grew up in Dublin, Ireland, in the 1970s and 1980s. And my secondary school was Wesley College, Dublin, which is a very nice independent school in the south of the city, right in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains, very pleasant green landscape. It looks a lot different today than it did then. There's a lot more housing. There's a motorway now right beside it. It's a lot busier. The population of Dublin has expanded. Property prices have gone through the roof. But back then it was quite a simple place. I spent a lot of time here in the science block. So I had my physics, my chemistry, and my biology classes here. But to be honest, I spent more time out here. So I was playing cricket, I was playing rugby, I was playing hockey. Although back then we played hockey on an all-weather grit surface. We didn't have the AstroTurf pitches that we have now. And of course, being Ireland, it was always raining. So all of these sports were played in the wet. But it was a fantastic school to go to. And throughout my presentation, I'm going to put some kind of what I would call tips loosely in red writing at the top. And this is my first one. It kind of resonates with me from my school motto, which was a quote from the Bible: "Prove all things, hold fast that which is good." And I think this is a really good analogy for the scientific method. Challenge everything. So I think in just about every research topic that I've looked into throughout my career, there's been some accepted wisdom. And I would say 90% of the time it's been wrong. So just doing some careful, rigorous measurements with a systematic approach has uncovered like a flaw in what people thought up till then. So I think that's the first thing I would say to anyone who's going into a research career. Don't accept anything at face value. And that takes me back to AI as well. AI is producing information, statistics, and opinions with utter confidence and 100% almost arrogance in the way it's displayed. Most of the time, you cannot trust it. And it's the same with the scientific literature. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of talking about published papers, but you can trust very little of what you read in the literature. So you've got to make up your own mind. You've got to keep an open mind, but challenge anything, particularly if it appears as dogma. It's probably wrong. And I think I got a really good grounding in this attitude, starting off in my secondary school and then leading into my degree and PhD. So then I was fortunate enough to go to Trinity College Dublin, where I did a primary degree in experimental physics. It started off as a broad natural sciences course for 2 years, where I did mathematics, chemistry, and physics. And then I specialized in physics in 3rd and 4th year. And I came out with, I think, a quite nicely rounded scientific education. At the end of the 4 years, we had a really interesting paper. It was the 5th of a series of papers that we took for our degree. And it was called the kind of back of the envelope calculation paper. So they would ask you a question like how many grains of sand are on a beach and things like that, or calculate the time it would take you to get to the moon and back on a rocket. So you had to know a little, but it was mainly about the way you thought and the structured approach you would take to problem solving. And, I didn't do particularly well in my degree. I wasn't, I was probably playing too much sport while I was in Trinity. And I probably could have done better in my degree. But in that paper, I did particularly well, because that's one of my skills, I think, to be able to take a pragmatic approach to problem solving. And so my PhD supervisor, Mike Coey, on the basis of that paper, invited me to do a PhD in his group, pictured here. First thing you'll notice about me back in the 1990s is that I had a little bit more hair than I do now. So you could probably plot a nice graph of hair versus time that would be pretty linear with my career progression as well. So I agreed to do a PhD. Mike Coey is one of the probably the most distinguished scientist in Ireland. So I did a lot of research into what it would be like working in his group. I also did my final year undergraduate project with him to kind of test the waters, and I really enjoyed it. As an undergraduate coming into that environment, there was a lot of support. There was there were several postdocs in the group who could help and guide me, and I just thought, yeah, I want to do a bit more of that. So my PhD then converted me from a physicist to an electrochemist. So up till now, I had just done one module of electrochemistry in the third year of my degree, didn't know anything about it, and I was plunged straight into a PhD looking at the effect of magnetic fields on copper electrolysis. And put simply, the effect of a magnetic field on copper plating and stripping is that it gently stirs the solution. Through this right-hand rule that any of you who did physics might know, that there's an orthogonal force on when you apply a magnetic field to a flow of charge. And that essentially creates gentle stirring in the solution, equivalent to rotating the electrode. And you can see, I really enjoy doing these nice fractal experiments, depositing copper in these two-dimensional planar electrochemical cells. And you can see this is the deposit when there's no applied magnetic field. And then when you apply a magnetic field out of the plane, the deposits start to spiral due to this Lorentz force, which is creating convection in the solution. When you apply the force in the opposite direction, it spirals the other way. So this was a really nice way of showing the existence of the force. Obviously, you can measure its impact on the limiting current. And I think my advance that I made in this field was to actually bring some physics to the problem. So to quantify the body forces that are acting in these electrochemical systems, and particularly the magnetic forces. And one of the things that I was proud of in my PhD, again, this is challenging conventional wisdom. This is the largest magnetic force that's acting in the solution, the paramagnetic force. But because it's acting in the same direction as the driving force for diffusion, it's actually completely swamped by the driving force for diffusion. So it doesn't have any influence, meaning that the other forces are actually dominant. And this is something that hadn't been thought about or considered in the past. And there was a raging debate in the literature, which I helped to resolve with this research. So again, challenge, accepted wisdom. It's almost always wrong. At the end of my PhD, so it's the year 2000, there's a lot of things going on at that time. It was just before 9/11 and the world was about to change in a big way. I decided I wasn't sure. Did I want to go into academic research? Did I want to go into industry? Did I want to leave science altogether and get a regular job? I didn't know. So I think I took the option that most people take, which is to do a postdoc, just to explore further. Because a PhD is really just an apprenticeship in R&D. It teaches you the skills to carry out research, and it prepares you for a variety of different careers. I was enjoying my time in Trinity. I was playing hockey for the university. I had a great social life. And in fact, these 2 years as a postdoc, I think I had more disposable income than any time before or since. I was teaching, I was demonstrating in labs, I had a job at the weekend, and I was paid quite well for my postdoc. So it was a very happy, flexible, and free time. And I was working on some really interesting projects. So looking at the effective magnetic field on copper plating in semiconductors for these vias of copper. I was looking at the effect of magnetic field on corrosion reactions. And again, this was my first introduction to corrosion during my postdoc. You can see if you look at some of the papers I published that time, how little I knew about corrosion, because I called the corrosion potential the rest potential, which I kind of laugh at when I look back now. But you can see, again, there is an effective magnetic field on corrosion because it's the same Lorentz force acting at open circuit. I also looked at electroplating of magnetic materials, both for transformers, working for an Irish company that was looking to develop a cheaper transformer. So that, again, was my first introduction to working on a commercial project, which I really enjoyed. And then looking at electroplating of magnetic materials for magnetic applications. So I kind of got a taste of working on multiple projects at the same time for a range of different stakeholders and with a focus on different things. So some of the projects were more fundamental in their view and they're aiming at scientific papers. Others were looking at improving a product for an industrial partner. And I liked doing both. And I would say almost equally. So that made it really hard to decide. So my next tip is it's really important who you work for and the environment that you're working in. So I'm sure most of you would automatically do this anyway, but do your research on the person you're going to be working for. So whether this is a postdoc, whether this is your first industry job, or whether it's your first appointment in academia, make sure you know who you're going to be working for. And it depends on your personality and what you're looking for. Are you looking for someone who's going to push you really hard? Are you looking for someone who's going to be nurturing and supportive? Are you looking for someone who's just going to just give you carte blanche to do whatever you want and really walk away and leave you to sink or swim, and so on? So from my point of view, I need someone who pushes me really hard and who challenges me. And both of my bosses that I've had, Mike at Trinity and Alan Turnbull at NPL, both had a very similar character, very driven people, on my case all the time, meeting me, you know, every day or every second day, chasing me for results, pushing me, challenging me to develop and challenging me to take on new things. So I can't speak highly enough of both of them. Very sadly, Mike passed away earlier this autumn, and to see all of the tributes that he received as one of the most eminent scientists that Ireland has ever produced, I think, you know, just says so much about the scientist he was and the person he was, the number of scientists that he developed in his group. It's well over 100 people, all still contributing to society. Alan was at NPL for 50 years. He retired last year. He's still active. He's still retained as a consultant and working on several of our projects. Again, one of the most highly thought of scientists in the corrosion field. And it's been an absolute pleasure to get to know him. And the support that he gave me and the opportunities he gave me have inspired me to try and do the same for the early career people working in my group now. So if I look at my NPL career timeline, so I joined NPL in 2002. And typically when you join with a PhD, you come in as what we call a higher research scientist, although they've now taken out the word research and it's just called a higher scientist. And my career development at NPL has been incredibly linear. So I've just followed the scientific path all the way through the organization. That is not for everyone. And one of the great things about NPL is it does give you the opportunity to explore at what point you branch off this linear scientific path. So you can go into management, and many people do it at around the senior research scientist stage. The management path is quicker than the scientific path. The scientific path takes a long time. It takes a long time to build up expertise, to build up your reputation, and to establish new areas of research. Whereas in management, you can fly up the chain much quicker. So a lot of people decide to do that. And then, of course, it can take you into other companies, other areas, and quite quite quickly. The more you move, the quicker you tend to rise up the career ladder. But from a scientific perspective, there aren't really any shortcuts. And so that would be my first bit of advice. If you're aiming for a scientific career, whether it's in academia, in industry, or in a national lab like NPL, it takes patience, time, and you just have to keep crunching away, keep producing papers, keep coming up with new ideas, and keep pursuing them. Maybe I'll just say a quick word about why I joined NPL. And it's not as strategic or planned as you might imagine. I had actually never heard of NPL before I applied for the job. My girlfriend at the time, when I met her, had already accepted a job in London working for an engineering firm. We'd been dating for about 6 months, and then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to London with her and see what happens. So I started applying for electrochemistry related jobs, and there aren't that many in London. There's a few universities, but back then there weren't many of them that were focused on electrochemistry. So I was looking at places like Oxford, Cambridge, Southampton that had electrochemistry groups. And then this advert from NPL popped up, and I thought, that's perfect. It's really close to where my girlfriend was going to be living in London. It was something I knew about, albeit not that much, corrosion, but I'd done a bit of work in my postdoc. I applied for it and I got it. And 23 years later, here I am, still there. And I absolutely love it. So these things aren't planned. A career isn't planned. It's just a bunch of stuff that happens and opportunities that come up. But it's just, are you in the right place and have the mindset to take them? So I know we're a little bit constrained for time. I did want to include some examples as we go through the talk of the technical areas I've worked in. I'm going to try and restrain myself from talking too much about them because I can get carried away and I would use up all the time that's there for questions. But just suffice it to say that the first thing I worked on when I came to NPL was stress corrosion cracking in steam turbines that are used in power plants. And I'm, in particular, doing a really nice and fiddly experiment to measure the corrosion potential at the tip of a growing crack in stainless steel. That was a really fiddly experiment that I worked on with Sinki Zhu, my first supervisor at NPL. Really interesting work. And I remember presenting it in Southampton at the Electrochem conference in 2003. And I remember Roger Newman asking me loads of questions that I couldn't even answer. So that was challenging, but it was a real baptism of fire being thrown straight in at the deep end in some really challenging, groundbreaking work. I also mainly worked on oil and gas corrosion for the first few years of my time at NPL. And one of the first things I looked at was the drop evaporation test, where we're looking at the evaporation of seawater that splashes onto the duplex stainless steel in marine environments. So it could be an oil rig, it could be a pipeline near the sea, and you get this kind of salt layer that builds up, and at the edge of the salt layer you get this perfect storm of conditions that can lead to stress corrosion cracking. And this was, I guess, the first work that actually led to some changes in industry practice, because through a lot of systematic tests, we discovered that the threshold temperature for cracking under these conditions was quite a bit lower than industry had assumed. So a lot of operators then changed their operating procedures as a result of the publication of this work. So again, it was kind of satisfying to see something that you do have an actual impact very quickly in the real world. Similarly, I worked on under-deposit corrosion. There was a very famous failure in the mid-noughties in Alaska, where a BP pipeline leaked a lot of oil out onto the Alaskan tundra, and it cost BP about $1 billion, which is even more money at that time than it is now. And on the back of that, we developed a test method with a multi-electrode array that allowed more robust and rapid screening of potential inhibitors for this type of corrosion. And again, this was a very counterintuitive mechanism and led to some controversy in the industry. But again, this was really important work. And we did some commercial work for a company in the Middle East later that allowed them to keep a pipeline open when they had a pigging failure, and they weren't able to clean out all of the crud from their pipelines. But our laboratory test showed to a high degree of confidence that under-deposit corrosion would not be an issue in that situation. So that saved them millions of dollars per day. So I think the point I'm getting to here was that I was doing a lot of really interesting fundamental research, but also working on commercial projects for companies. So one really interesting project we did here was pumping seawater around a pipeline with a proprietary piece of apparatus in it that was being developed by a UK company. And we were pumping seawater around this at 18 liters per second with a massive pump and a huge reservoir of 200 liters of seawater at temperature. So this was really useful work, and I love the kind of practical element of it. Another one that I worked on was measuring the corrosion potential of stainless steel containment materials for radioactive devices for medical applications. So for sterilization of medical instruments, these things were stored at the bottom of the pond to protect from the radiation. And we had to somehow get a reference electrode probe down there in that radiation environment and make measurements of the corrosion potential, because they were worried about galvanic corrosion when they mixed different materials down there. So again, I love doing all that, getting out there in the real world and making some kind of quick and dirty measurements to help companies. So I love that balance, and I guess that's why I've never really had to make that decision. Do I want to go into academia or do I want to go into industry? I feel quite comfortable in this national lab environment where we're doing a bit of both. So we're working with lots of great universities and research institutes, but also with a whole load of companies across corrosion, hydrogen technologies, batteries, and analytical electrochemistry. So it's been very rewarding for me, and I'm confident that I'm still in the right place for my particular interests and what motivates me. Right, my next tip then, and I guess this is more related to the EFC and my current position as president, and that is to grow your professional network and start early. You can't start early enough in doing this. These are some of the professional organizations that I've been involved with during my time at NPL. Obviously, the EFC is probably the dominant one at the moment, but the first one was probably the Institute of Corrosion, which I joined in 2003. I'd never heard of it. Alan Turnbull said, you should join this, you should get involved with the corrosion science division. It ended up with me helping to organize the annual corrosion science symposium, which is held every September for UK students in corrosion science. And then eventually organizing and chairing the session at Eurocore 2008 in Edinburgh. And it just opens up your visibility. It opens up the number of people that you know in your field and beyond. And having a large and growing professional network is absolutely critical to your career. It gives you opportunities for collaboration. If you're in industry or national labs, it gives you opportunities for commercial work. It gives you visibility. And it just means that when a problem or an opportunity comes to someone, they're more likely to think of you if they know you through this network than if they don't. So I can't say anything strong enough about the importance of doing this. What is around now that wasn't around in 2002 when I started is social media and LinkedIn. And as I say, I'm probably the wrong person to advise you, because just like AI, and I may be a dinosaur here, I'm not a massive believer in social media and LinkedIn for me. I recognize the absolute value of it for visibility and growing a network, and I am on LinkedIn, but I never really ever post anything. And that's just my personal belief, that I don't like sharing myself with the community so much. I don't think it's completely healthy, but I recognize that everyone's different. So I'm by no means trying to discourage anyone from getting out there and posting on LinkedIn and on other social media platforms. I would just, like everything, encourage you to consider the potential downsides as well as the very obvious upsides. Some other work, I just thought I'd put this in because it's a nice video. We were looking at the effect of surface preparation on cracking of stainless steel. So there's a nice video that we did using electron backscatter diffraction and focused ion beam milling, where you can see the edge of a pit here, and we're milling away 50 nanometer slices of the material and imaging in between each removal, so that you can get a look at the subsurface microstructure, and you can see these striations here that are actually parallel to the microstructure. And you can see that the surface crack actually only gives you a very limited amount of information about what's happening below. And one of the critical observations was the different color around the edges of the crack is to do with de-alloying within the microstructure. So this technique led to a lot of deeper understanding about how pits and cracks develop in stainless steel, particularly in oil and gas environments under sour conditions, i.e. in the presence of hydrogen sulfide. So I'll just let this video play out because it's got a nice kind of butterfly effect at the end when the last little piece is removed on that bridge. There we go. I won't dwell on this, but again, just showing how kind of fundamental laboratory-based electrochemical techniques can be used to aid material selection in oil and gas exploration. And this was a bit of work I did to measure pitting potential and repassivation potential at elevated temperature and pressure and in the presence of hydrogen sulfide. And the key simple idea was just to cool down the crevice that forms when you clamp the specimen into the autoclave. And that means that you don't get any crevice corrosion and you're actually measuring a pitting or a repassivation potential rather than the crevice corrosion. And this is included just to show the kind of variety of the work that we did. So there was a problem with some of the wind turbine monopiles in the North Sea in the mid-2010s. And we were able to show that the acidification of the seawater inside the monopile due to retrofitted cathodic protection was could be replicated in the lab. And we showed that an engineering solution of drilling holes in the bolts and allowing seawater to flow through would fix the problem. So again, very applied research with, you know, a recommendation for industry that could be immediately acted on. Another aspect of career development is continuing to review, look at the outside world, look at trends in research, look at trends in industry, and not being afraid to try new things. So that's something that is quite a theme of my career at NPL, that I'm not just still doing corrosion in oil and gas. In fact, I'm doing very little of it now. If I had just stayed doing oil and gas corrosion for the last 23 years, A, I'm not sure I'd still be here. I probably would have been let go a long time ago. And B, what I'm doing now would be pretty small and niche and of limited interest. So you've got to keep reinventing yourself. You've got to come up with new initiatives, and exactly, don't be afraid to try new things. So this is a kind of, these are the main 5 areas I've worked in my time at NPL. It's not exhaustive. There are other, I guess, some smaller areas of activity that I've been involved in, but these are the main 5 themes. So as I say, starting off when I came to NPL in 2002, working on oil and gas corrosion, I was fortunate to have support, and you need this support if you're going to launch a new area. Alan Turnbull gave me very solid backing and actually had to fight quite hard to allow this new area to be created at NPL, which then I went on to lead in fuel cells. That was followed by electrolyzers in about 2011 and batteries in 2013. And the most recent area that we've gone into following the UK government's decision to stop funding any fossil fuel-based research at NPL, we went into carbon capture, utilization and storage, or CCUS, in 2021. And I'm sure, I don't know what the next thing will be, but there will be something soon that we start. And in fact, we're already having discussions about what that may be. So things come and go. These 5 areas ebb and flow with demand and with trends in government and in industry. But yeah, this is about the importance of starting new things, and don't be afraid to go into something that you know absolutely nothing about. It takes 5 to 10 years to establish a new area and become competent in it and at the point where you can make an impact. So it does require investment and support, but it's got to be done. So some of examples of these new areas. So this is measuring humidity in polymer electrolyte membrane fuel cells, which was the first time this had ever been done. Measured in situ with these stripped back commercial sensors that we inserted into the flow field plates of the fuel cell at various places around the flow field. And again, it showed up some really interesting features of the distribution of water in a fuel cell, which is really important to its operation and lifetime. We then extended this to reference electrodes, and I'll refer you back to the first thing I did at NPL, which was measuring the corrosion potential at a cracked tip. I think that really inspired me to look at how to use reference electrodes in a range of different electrochemical devices. So we had this very novel concept of inserting a salt bridge through the end plates of a fuel cell to measure the local potential at any point within the operating cell. So you can see how complicated this was when we used an array of these electrodes. And it was really useful at identifying carbon corrosion on the support for the platinum catalyst, which is a lifetime limiting factor in these devices. My next tip is don't let people tell you something is impossible. You know, if you have an idea, there will always be more people queuing up to tell you that it won't work than people who think it's a good idea. So if people say something's impossible and you believe it is, stick to your guns and see it through. And one example from my career is the hydrogen refueling station that was opened to the public in 2016. This is a photo of it operational with the NPL fuel cell car. I was told, don't even try this, it'll never happen. You'll never get a public refueling station on Crown Estates land in Bushy Park in southwest London. But here it is, it happened. And it just took perseverance and hard work and talking to the right people. Related to that work was some really nice work we did with the company that manufactures the refueling stations, ITM Power, who are a UK company based in Sheffield. And again, it was putting reference electrodes inside their devices and actually showing that it was the cathode that caused problems during startup and shutdown rather than the anode. Everybody in the industry assumed that the anode was the problem, but this was the first work that showed actually you're looking at the wrong electrode. It's a platinum cathode. So we've done a lot of work on that. And probably the thing I'm most proud of in this area is showing that the very expensive materials that companies use to make bipolar plates, they use platinum coated titanium, when actually our work has shown, using again reference electrodes and some associated modeling, that the local potential is actually much lower than assumed. So you can actually use much cheaper materials, not only for the bipolar plate, but for the bulk of the porous transport layer. So actually where the corrosion happens is only a few tens or at most hundreds of microns away from the anode electrode. So this is work that, again, people don't believe. It's against accepted wisdom. It takes a lot of persuasion and convincing of people to accept this, but the science shows that it's true. And we expect that over time, we will see this innovation coming into future iterations and next generation polymer electrolyte membrane water electrolyzers. My next tip is work with people who know things that you don't. So collaboration is really important. I'm probably preaching to the choir here. The best work is produced by people who know different things and come together to work collaboratively on a challenging problem that requires a multidisciplinary approach. And we see that more and more in the work that we're doing at NPL and in universities. I've been invited to a meeting in a university in January where they're bringing together different departments to talk about multidisciplinary research with external stakeholders. And I think more and more, that's how we are going to solve the world's pressing scientific problems. And it's something that corrosion scientists need to be involved in. Corrosion is quite a horizontal discipline in terms of applications. So I think we're used as a community to doing this already, but it's certainly becoming a broader theme. And just for context, again, these are 3 Toyota Mirais, the NPL one, the Imperial College London one, and the UCL one. This is Anthony Kucernak, an electrochemist from Imperial, and Dan Brett, an electrochemist from UCL. And I've had many fruitful collaborations with them over the last 15 years or so. Okay, I'm just coming to the end of the presentation now. I thought I'd say a little bit about more recent work on batteries. So this is some groundbreaking work that my first PhD student in the battery area, Donal Finnegan, who's now working for NREL in the US. We did this at the synchrotron at the ESRF in Grenoble, looking at cylindrical lithium-ion batteries and looking inside them using X-rays to show the extremely rapid, you can see the time counting here. This is happening in thousandths of a second timescales. Thermal runaway when you heat the external surface of a battery to simulate a kind of thermal runaway process in a battery pack. So this is how electric vehicle fires start. This research has continued for the past 10 years, and I'm actually currently reviewing the manuscript from the latest of a series of PhD students in this area who have extended this and shed a lot of light on the mechanisms of thermal runaway that will hopefully make future batteries more safe. And a new area for NPL, metrology for high energy density batteries, which is supporting next generation technology development like sodium ion, lithium sulfur, and solid state batteries, in addition to making lithium ion batteries more cost effective, safer, and giving them higher range for EVs. And I think my final tip is help other people whenever you can. I got a lot of help when I was starting out in my career and as I went through it. And there's an expression, pay it forward. If you're helped, then make sure that you help someone else. So I was going to finish on something about values. And I've been chatting to a few people about giving this webinar. I was going to say, be true to yourself and your own personal values. Some people say, yeah, that's great advice, but others said, no, that's terrible advice, because sometimes you need to do things that make you uncomfortable just to fit in or to survive or to politically get through a situation. So I think I'll nuance that advice by saying, I think I've been quite fortunate in my career that, you know, first of all, I come from a reasonably privileged background in that, you know, I'm white, I'm male, I'm from a European country. I had a good education and I had plenty of opportunities. And my problem was actually narrowing down those opportunities and picking the one that suited me best. Whereas people from other backgrounds might have the opposite problem, that they don't have opportunities. They find barriers put in front of them, their childhood experiences and their background and potential discrimination change their attitude and make things difficult for them. So I think I would nuance it by saying, if you can, stay true to yourself and your values, but depending on your outlook and your background and the situation you find yourself in, that may be too idealistic. And I think my final point is, of course, I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. I hope you found this brief description of my career and my kind of thoughts at the various points of my career in some way useful. And I'm more than happy to, first of all, answer the questions that were provided before the talk and any ones that have occurred to you during it. So thank you very much, everyone, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you, Gareth. It was very, very nice. I will now stop the recording so people feel comfortable to ask the question they want to.